for Chinese society to unleash our consumption potential over the long term and to increase the resilience and flexibility of economic development, it relies on the successful, sustained, and effective stimulation of China's domestic demand market. The core of this is to raise and improve the per capita income of residents. That way, when ordinary people have money in their pockets, they feel secure, they're willing to spend, and they're happy to spend. Of course, this also needs to be coordinated with what we just mentioned, the improvement of the social security system. So you can also notice a phenomenon in the past 2 years. Due to these special circumstances, the so-called post-pandemic era, people's savings rate has been very high. Our GDP growth is about 5%, but our savings rate remains very high. Our savings rate is about 18%, somewhere between 18 and 20. When it's higher, it's 20. When it's lower, it's 18. You will see that, actually, if you look at our savings rate in terms of the overall economic cycle, the investment and savings model, our economic drive, or you could say the output gap, is actually quite significant. Everyone is putting their money in the bank, right? They're not spending, not investing, right? This is actually an issue mentioned by Professor Gu Chaoming in his recent book, The Memory of Catching Up. A common problem faced by countries with high savings rates is insufficient consumption and not enough investment-driven growth. So how can we effectively turn savings into investment? That is, how do we turn our ability to save into spending power and turn our ability to save into investment capability so that we can sustainably and effectively drive demand, boost domestic demand, and promote economic growth over the long term? This is a fundamental question that our kind of economy has to face for the long run. So, when it comes to China's consumer market, there is a lot of potential and resilience, and it has a bright future. However, there is also a lot of room for reform and improvement. It really requires comprehensive, systemic changes. That's why I am very optimistic about the future of China's consumer market. Of course, the first important point is that China's consumer market is the largest single market in the world. With 1.4 billion people, it's equivalent to the combined population of the European Union, Japan, the North American Free Trade Area, and several major Southeast Asian countries. Put together, that's about the same scale as our market. So, China's market is an extremely large domestic market and a unified, integrated market. That's why the country is promoting the establishment of a unified, large-scale market. By establishing this, we can reduce friction, barriers to entry, and market segmentation in the legal, institutional, and transaction environments, creating a unified market with a market economy as its core characteristic. This way, the potential, resilience, and capacity of China's consumer market will be fully unleashed. So I remain very optimistic about China's consumer market. In other words, consumption is the stabilizer and ballast of China's economy. Chinese consumption is the only way for China to move beyond middle income, achieve high-quality development, and build a uniquely Chinese path to modernization. Chinese consumption falters, the challenges facing China's economy will be especially severe. That's why I've talked about this before, written articles, and given interviews on the topic. I'm optimistic about Chinese consumption. If you have a long-term positive outlook on China's economy, you must also have a long-term positive outlook on Chinese consumption.